So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the final hyper session of year 2024. We are going to close the year big with a session from our boss, Professor Roshan Ragel. The session will be mainly on prompt engineering, I think, which is a new skill we all need to master. How to get the best out of AI technologies, how to tell the devil what to do. So without further ado, I invite Professor Roshan Ragel, the head of the Department of Computer Engineering and a consultant CEO, Lanka Research and Education. Learn. Right? Sir, podium is all yours.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Kapila, and good afternoon, everyone. Can I get my slides there? So good afternoon one more time, and let me, okay, so something that we didn't check is, give me a second. I don't know whether the sound of this is going to the Zoom. Is it coming to Zoom? So that's a small video about AI, and it was prepared by NVIDIA, a company who help improve AI systems through their hardware and other things. So as you all know, why we are talking about something. This is all. Okay. So we are also catering to about 40-50 people online. So they are with us. Can I bring this to me? So we are talking about AI systems and their importance. That is why we are having this, even the whole forum and the discussions here. And you saw the video, the different type of thing AI can do. And here is something more, a graph to compare AI system performance to human performance. So when it comes to AI system performance, we are talking about the best possible AI out there to doing these various tasks. And human performance is the average human performance. It's not really a very fair comparison, but that's a comparison. So the line here says human performance 100%. What we are trying to show here is there are a number of tasks where AI systems can do better, within quote, compared to human. Let's take one example, reading comprehension. What do we mean? Can AI systems read and comprehend like human? We know what we mean by reading and comprehending by ourselves. Can AI systems do? As per the numbers, in fact, they can do better than human by now. They can read and comprehend better than us. Two sides to it. One, are they really good or better than us in reading and comprehending these tools, other computers? What do you think? Are they better than us? How is this done? How do we find, or how the numbers are made? How are these numbers derived? So if you take something like reading comprehension, what we are doing really is we put AI tools to a reading comprehension test, like what we do for people, right? How do we do reading comprehension test? We do reading comprehension test in languages, maybe let's say English. So we give a passage, ask human to read and answer questions, right? So that's the test we are doing. So what it checks is okay, whether we can memorize or read and reproduce, and looks like those tools can do better than us. But what do we really mean by comprehension? What do we really mean when we say we comprehend something? Is it just reading and answering questions? Or is it more? Obviously, it's more. But the test or the assessment we have had for over several decades or maybe centuries is to let us read and answer questions. So these tools can do better there. Which doesn't, one side, yes, the test we have, these tools doing better. But on the other side, we also had to maybe ask educators question how we do the assessment. How are we testing? Are we testing, when we say we are testing for reading comprehension, are you testing the right thing? So there are both sides. So there's some opportunity that these tools can do really well in the test that we had designed. But at the same time, there are also challenges, meaning we had to understand how to do these tests, right? So how to do these tests better so that we can really do the test properly, or whether we can identify how human comprehend. So that's just to bring the complexities into the equation of AI, and we start using AI. And this is just one example, right? So now we can think of many others. There are even tests for doing common sense completion. It's another test where we see, like, we give part of a sentence and ask human to complete and AI to complete. These days, by 2022, 2023, AI tools are doing as good as human, even for such things. And a few others are like, in the past, handwriting recognition, it was achieved much earlier, or image recognition and so on. So these are things that are happening, and tools are coming and helping in one way and also challenging us. So that is the interest of having this discussion and why it is important. All this took a big turn, and we started paying a lot of attention. Even we started AI, the IFA, AI for academics, when we encountered this generative AI era, right? So what this graph again shows is, if you take any organization, these statistics are from US, any organization, whether they have used AI to automate at least one function in their organizational work. It could be education, it could be business, any type of business, anything, right? At least one function, whether they have automated, right? So if they have done it, then it's a yes, if not, no. Over the years, you can see these numbers are improving. In fact, like somewhere in 2017, something big happened. Those who are in the field AI, they know this introduction or the use of deep learning. Since then, the numbers have gone from 20 to 40 and about 50. So for the last several years, we had about 50% of the companies who were interviewed or surveyed were using at least one function in AI. So AI is used for automating one of their business functions, at least one. But then somewhere in 2022, 2023, the numbers have gone from 50 to 70. And it's in the rise. So the one that is contributing the most to it is generative AI. So generative AI, as you can see, in 2022, the percentage is 33, and it has gone to 65, contributing a lot to the 72 in the overall adoption. So generative AI is everywhere, and the numbers next year, it's going to be high, obviously. And that is why we are also talking about it. We see how we can use it in our education and research work, right? So we are talking about generative AI. So with generative AI and also the natural language processing, meaning how we can use our language to communicate with systems, machines, the machines, how much it can understand what we are saying, that communication. So the understanding of natural language by machines, In fact, that is also was one of the items in the previous graph. So with those, with the improvement, so we can talk to machines, and also the machines, these AI systems can now generate things. Come a question, we are talking to these machines like how we talk to among ourselves. Right? We no longer talk in terms of how we usually used to talk. We use API calls. We had different algorithms or different interfaces, different methods, and various other things is how we were communicating with the machine all this time. And suddenly we are at a place where the machines, we can communicate natural language, machines can understand, and also they can generate and give us content which is in the forms that we normally deal with. So with that, a challenge of this communication, the communication between us and these machines, we start talking about what is known as this prompt engineering or prompting techniques. So techniques where we ask or how we communicate with these systems, right? And today's discussion is on this, how we can communicate with these machines or how we can do better than how we normally do, right? So if we carefully think about communication, we have been learning to communicate from day one, from the time we were born, right? And some educational system compared to others spend more time on communication earlier. Even now, we were said the westernized or more modern education systems spend more time on language and art in their primary school compared to we going and jumping into maths and all sort of other things, right? So language and art, why? Because communication. So if you can learn to communicate properly, so that communication, I'm talking about communication, I'm talking about communicating between people, among people, right? So such communication help us deal with situations better, solve problem better among people, right? So understand problem better, read faster, comprehend faster. All that are possible if we can communicate better. This is in the human context. Now that there's machines, can we use communication in a way the machines can understand? Now that the machine, we say they can understand natural language, can we communicate with these machines the same way how we communicate? So today, if you just remembered, we came here, waited for a while, we made a joke about 5 minutes, we started at 1:05, and then like we started jumping into the topic, we played a video. All this, if you do the same way with the machine, can it understand what's going on? Can it comprehend? Can it figure out what these fellows are trying to do? Right? If I do the same thing with instead of this 40 odd of you, if I do it with a machine the same exact way, can it know all this? Can it understand the same way? Can it understand a joke like why Sri Lanka starts things 5 minutes late, right? Things like that, right? So can it do it? If not, what do we have to do to make it to do it? Make it to understand the context. So because we are in the context, we know a lot of other things. We are come here for a purpose. We walked. We have this spatial context where we are. All that a machine doesn't have it, right? So whether I'm using a chat GPT from here or in my office or on the road, it doesn't know. For now, at least, it doesn't know, right? So, but there are differences when we communicate with people and when we communicate with these things. Although the machines can now understand what people say, it is not just about what we say. There's more, right? So how can we communicate better with this machine, right? So what do we have to consider? Like I said, if we learn to communicate properly and understand what communication means, that is enough. And obviously some common sense, right? So if that is the case, actually that's enough. So that is what we have to do. We have to go back and think about how we are communicating, what context we have in our communication. Can we bring those into a machine communication we are having with the machine, right? So today's session, I'm going to share a few tips related to that. So I'll start with an introduction to generally generative AI and also a little on the prompt engineering and or prompting. Don't get overwhelmed with the term engineering, right? So it's just for people to scare others off, right? So prompting, right? So, and then a few strategies to get better results, best practices. And then I'll go into a little more advanced prompting technique we call. When we say advanced, there's more systematic way of doing it, right? So we can, like I said, we can just do it if we know what we want and if we know what the system knows and what communication means. If you know this, you can figure out your own way of doing it. But then there are some systematic way of, people have proposed a few systematic way of doing it. So we'll look at those and we'll finish with some safeguarding and optimizing techniques. So that's the plan. To start, just wanted to, I hope by now IFA members would know this diagram or the context well. But just to remind you, something like generative AI is a sub discipline of artificial intelligence. So generative artificial intelligence is a sub discipline, which is part of deep learning. And it is possible with a lot of other things like data, right? So AI went into machine learning by utilizing a lot of data that is available to us. And from there, deep learning and generative AI. So it's part of a bigger thing, right? So, but we are focusing now on generative AI. The graph and also the video I was showing at the beginning is not just about generative AI. It's about AI, all of the other things together. So, but we are focusing today on generative AI. And most of what we are discussing at IFA sessions are on generative AI. So like I mentioned earlier, we can use generative AI to communicate. So the machines or the system or the AI can understand natural language. And at the same time, it can also produce different forms: text, audio, video, images, even programs, right? So even these systems, we can ask it to write programs, right? So there are a lot of different things we can do, and it generates all different type of multiple different models. When it comes to prompts, we can do things like this, right? So for example, here is a prompt: generate an image of a Python programmer, right? If you don't know what Python is a programming language from a computer perspective. But you don't know, if you don't know Python, if you don't know Python programming language, you know what Python is, right? So when you write, if you write a prompt like this, what can you guess what the image would be? Maybe this, right? Maybe, right? So because we didn't, okay, so we said Python programmer, but did we give enough context, right? What did we expect in the first place? Like, obviously, if I'm writing it, I expect not this. Maybe some of you would have expected this if you don't know there's a programming language called Python. So you want a Python to come and program, right? So yeah, so depends, right? So, but then we didn't give enough context, right? So we might expect this, or we might expect something else. Obviously, we might not expect, we might get other different things, right? So we don't, there's no enough context, right? That's the point. So for prompting, obviously what we had to do is to give enough context. That is where we are going to start. So what prompting means is, we already said, it's the input of the question we are asking from the system or the model, we call it. In fact, it is becoming a really interesting topic. And I have just highlighted a few courses from popular places. One is from a university called Prompt Engineering. Sorry, it's too small. A popular course with, as you know, like this is on a MOOC platform. There are courses by companies like IBM is a company, Google, you know, is another company. So they're all offering these courses where you can go and follow, and like a 2-month, 3-month course where you will learn how to practice and learn how to write prompt. So if you get some interest from what we are doing today, you can go and follow one of these courses. Right? So what are we trying to do here is by using proper prompting techniques, we are going to achieve these things. One, define the objective, be clear and precise what we are trying to tell the system, consider the context, and also we can expect the system to give different type of answers. So because the system is very generic, if I ask a question here from someone, like depends on from who I'm asking the question, I expect different answers, right? So I don't expect the same answer from all of you, right? If I ask the same question from different people, I expect different answers, different tones in the answer. You also know, like, okay, so maybe the way how I expect answers from this group, which is teachers, is different from the class I expect answers from the students. So they're different. The communication are different, and therefore I expect different things. But when I ask a system to give an answer, if I don't tell the system this is what I expect, then I don't get what I want. I get something generic. I get this or that. I get both, any of this. Right? So I can get anything. I can't complain that the system is not giving what I expect unless you tell the system. But here, human communication is different because we know from whom we are asking, and we know what to expect. Right? So they are different. And when you are asking questions, it's better have these questions direct and avoid bias. Bias meaning these systems can give answers based on, in fact, like things like bias is not something that was introduced by these systems. Bias is everywhere. You all are biased to various different things, right? And the problem is we are not actually against bias. We are against unexpected bias, right? Say, for example, in this room, if I am communicating, if I expect something that is like, let's say, even the accent, like if you all start talking like how the Britishers talk, I feel, okay, I'm in the wrong place, right? So things like that, right? So those are bias, right? So in a place like this is what I expect. This is how you will talk. This is how you'll. So those things can be avoid even in a system, because the system doesn't look at those aspects. It doesn't look at from where I'm asking a question, whom I'm asking question, unless we tell so, right? And also can we avoid, when by asking the right questions, can we also avoid it leaving things out, or expecting or giving more questions like without giving the right answer and so on. And we also should make sure before we like decide to take an answer and go forward, we should make sure we test the answer whether it's correct, and obviously refine it before we make it final, right? And also obviously we'll also have to consider all the ethical and privacy concerns, right? So I believe in the sessions we had earlier, we have been talking about whether these answers are useful, whether we are going to use them, where we are going to use them, how we are going to use them, how we are going to use the content that is generated. We have been discussing those, right? So here the assumption is we are going to use the content that is generated. How do we make it better? How do we make this generated content better? That is the discussion here, right? Just to be clear. So if you want to have these prompts that are effective, we had to have a number of things. So we'll just start with a very basic idea, but then we'll go into deeper details of each one of these as we go. So like I said, these systems, they have no idea from where we are, what we expect, what is the context in which we expect things, and therefore we'll start a prompt by giving a context. Doesn't have to be like we start a prompt with a context, but we can have the context somewhere in our prompt. So context is important. Things like what we said in the previous prompt, the image of a Python programmer without any other context is not good, right? So we had to have context. So here is an example. I put an example that is more closer to us, teachers, right? So the example is to ask generative AI to create a lesson plan. So that is the idea. So I want to create a lesson plan. So you can see for the context, I'm giving some background. I'm expecting the system to be something. I'm saying, okay, I'm telling this to the system for the AI. You are an expert or an education expert who specializes in, we can specify a field, teaching who? Undergraduate students of level 3, we can say what, and in which field. So the details we can give here, that is the context we are giving. So we are also giving a context and also telling the system, we expect the system to behave like this, behave as an educational expert in that field, right? So that first thing we are saying. And then we are going to tell a task what to do. So create a lesson plan that is for 60 minutes on we can specify a topic. And in fact, we can give more detailed instructions. So that's just giving a task, more detailed instruction. The lesson plan must cater to high order thinking skill, must encapsulate universal design for learning principles, and various other things. We can keep on going with all the steps, all the instructions, details, what we expect from the system to generate. And then we also have to have this component of clarifying and refining, like I mentioned earlier. We have to make sure whether it got it right. It is in a place where we thought it's supposed to be, right? So we can ask questions like this, or we can ask it to say yes, or you can ask it to say no. So some of the problems that we have with the communication is that unless you specifically ask the system to say no or say don't know, usually it's not going to say don't know, right? That is how the system is built. Not going to say don't know, I don't know, right? Unless you make room for it. So it's possible for you in your communication to say, if you don't know, say don't know. Then yes, if it doesn't know, it can say don't. Right? So that communication we have to make. So the clarifying, the refining part involve that. So you can make prompts more effective by considering these aspects. I'll go into more details of each one of them as we go, and also break down of it and different. Obviously, why it is useful is because we can obviously get better quality responses, and we can save time and can get consistent output. So that's one of the problems that you usually have, because these systems, every time you ask, you get different responses if you are not being very specific. Right? And also, one of the main aspect that we don't normally consider as users is optimization. So because, like when you are communicating with these systems, at least for now, most of these systems are somewhere far away from us in the world, right? So one, we have to, the more text we send across, the more resources you are going to use for the communication, right? So more text you send, you are going to use a lot of resources to send it and receive. At the same time, you'll also use more resources in the place where this is processed, right? So where it is processed, they are going to use a lot of power and a lot of cooling, a lot of the greenhouse gases and whatnot, right? So all that, right? So making it effective, right prompt, help resolve those issues as well. So let me just quickly go into some strategies to get better results. I have mentioned these earlier, but I'll go into more examples and details, right? So one, write clear instructions. So we'll start with instructions, how we can write clear instructions, right? So when you're writing instructions, include details so that you get more details, things like the context, like I mentioned earlier, right? So here are some examples. So some example prompts and how you can do it better, right? So with more details. So more details, any more detail that you can give, right? So instead of asking things like I'm just taking example from different domains and not specific for anything. How do I calculate revenue? Instead of just asking that, you can ask more specific. How do I calculate the total revenue for a retail store or anything else, given the unit price of products and the number of units sold per month, right? So you can go into more details, even other prompts like, how do I create a project plan? Instead of just saying that, give more context, what we are talking about and what we expect. So give more context, right? So this is just part of it. Give more details, right? So include more details wherever possible. The more the better, but obviously not to like duplicate, give the same details several times, but best way is to effectively give as much information, as much detail as possible. Right? So those are the things we'll discuss as we go. And the next thing is, when we are giving these details and when we are giving prompts, make sure the system understands it clearly. What do we mean by that is, can we have, we call them delimiters. The idea is some way of separating, right? So some way of separating things. Like for example, if I say, okay, the following is a paragraph or following is a text, make it better. And I give a text, right? So for how long the text is, I might say something later. I might say, okay, this is translate it. Or I might say something like, so I start by saying following is a text. You are an expert in languages, let's say, and improve it, make it better, include this and that. And then we give a text, right? And then maybe I wanted to say, after giving the text, make this many sentences or this many words, all that I can say. So when I do like an instruction, some text and some more instruction, how the system will separate these parts? How does it know this is text and I'm giving more instruction later, right? If not, the instruction can also be considered part of the same text, right? So it's not clear. So places like that, make sure you use some way to separate them, right? For example, like this, right? So it's possible to give prompts like this, right? So instead of giving it like this, just summarize the text below as a bullet point. That's just a prompt, right? List of the most important points. We can just give a text, or we can give it like this. Summarize the text below, same prompt, but the text is given like this. Text is set to be text. We call this tagging. So we say, okay, this is the text. So we say text, and then with quotes. In fact, like here, we are using these three quotes, 3 double quotations, right? So 3 quote. We don't normally use 1. We don't also use 2 for some various reasons. I'll not go into detail, because like usual text it can have quote, right? So we don't want to confuse those usual quote with ours, and therefore we are using 3 quote. Inside this, we put all the text. So it's very clear to the system what is coming below. You can write further things below. It can be separated because we are saying, well, this is the text, and the text starts. We don't have to specifically say, because system knows if it's 3 quote, the text in between is what the text is. So just make sure we are clearly separating different parts, instructions, the text we are giving, or the samples we are giving. Make sure they are clearly separated. So that's very clear. That's another idea. The next one is about the output. So when you are specifying, giving input, we also can say what we expect as an output. So we can say things like desired format and also the length, right? So formats, we can consider these. There can be others, like you can consider things like images, graphs, and other things. Here, these are mostly about text. The formats, we can say the format has to be bullet points or just paragraphs. Paragraphs is the default one, like we don't have to specifically say. And nowadays, the systems, at least the advanced ones, are also figuring out what is the best way to present data and put things on table without you asking, or put them as bullet points and so on. But you can specifically ask, right? So you can ask. Some of these are more technical. You don't have to worry about each one of them. But the idea is you can consider or giving of specific formats in the output. And also you can specify the length. And also you can specify certain custom format. I'll show examples. You can say, this is exactly what I want. This is how it should look like. I'll show examples, right? About the length, we can say things like the number of paragraph, number of bullet points, number of, if you're asking it to produce steps, number of steps and so on, right? So let us look at examples, right? So here is one, summarize the text. So that other part is already sorted, like we are putting this in delimiters and therefore they are in triple quote. So summarize it in 2 paragraphs. That is what we are saying here, right? One prompt. How can we improve it? We can make it better. So we can say things like the format one I mentioned. Extract key information about a movie from the given text and desired format. We can specify formats like this. We can say, okay, title, movie title, year of release, and genre. And we can specifically say what it is, main one, or if there are multiples, we can also specify those. And also the plot, right? So what's the plot of the movie? Maybe one sentence, we can even say multiple sentences and things like that. So we can specifically say a desired format, and when the text is given and when it is generated, it will generate with the title, the movie title, year, genre, and so on, like the plot summary and so on, right? So we can keep giving specific formats by specifically saying what it is. And as you can see, we are using different ways of writing it. Like for example, title, we just wrote title and a colon. And here within bracket, we are writing movie title, right? So that is not the real movie title. The real movie title will be filled by the tool when it reads a paragraph about a movie, right? So the idea is we give a paragraph and ask it to identify these and write a summary. So the point is, it's possible for us to specifically give what we expect in the output. One more step. This is again, I mentioned, like one more idea, I mean. Specifically say the steps involved in what you want to do. Right? So we can specifically say steps like this. So use the following steps or step-by-step instruction to respond to my request. Step 1, I'll provide you with the text in triple quotes. Summarize this text in one sentence with a prefix that says summary. Right? So I'm giving a specific step to do one part of a work. Right? So like that, I can go into steps and say these are the steps to do. And therefore, it can clearly do one after the other. So here is so actually this example is to first summarize and also to translate. So we are giving them as 2 steps. Right? We'll go into more detail on how we can break things into steps or task into steps, when to divide, when to break, and so on as we go. But it's possible to do things like this, breaking into steps. And it's useful. Make sure you don't provide this not so clear, imprecise descriptions. Like here is one, right? So an imprecise one. We wanted to give this prescription about what we expect. But if we give something like this, the description for this product should be fairly short, a few sentences only, and not too much more, right? So things like this we can specify. I mean, it's obviously not very precise. Be more precise, right? Depends on what we expect. So we can say specifically say this many sentences we want and so on. So when we are specifying output, make sure we are being precise and therefore we expect or we get what we expect. So one other idea is when we are talking to these systems, even earlier I mentioned this in a different context, we might do this. We might do like we put some content and ask some instruction, or like give some instruction. I also told you this earlier, like when you're having instructions and content, make sure they are clearly separated and the system or the AI knows this is content. This is something that, like for example, just to take examples even from here, right? So here, so that is, so the differences the system should know, right? So how we are differentiating is by giving some instruction, giving a format, and then giving the content, right? So the content is given. So most of the time we give content, and there are situations where we don't, but giving content is always useful. I'll come to that later, right? So now when you are doing that, we have seen the system doing better by what is known as this double downing. The idea is, what you double down means, instead of giving like complete separation between content and instruction, content separately, instruction separately, having them together like one after the other, repeated, like, so you first start with some instruction, then you give content, then you ask more instruction, it gives better response, right? It gives better response, but the main catch there is we have to make sure the instruction and the content are clearly separated. It is told to the system, okay, this is instruction. So instruction, you don't specifically say anything, you just type and it's instruction. And it's more like action, right? So action verbs and things like that are there. So therefore it's instruction. And if the content has action verb, it doesn't mean it has to act on it. So therefore we had to put that in a specific way, right? So the content can also have action verbs and so on, and it can get confused if you don't say so. So you put that in this double quote. So that is one way I like told earlier, but there are other ways as well. I'll come to that later. But it's usually possible to put that in this triple quote, not double, sorry. The triple quote, you put the content inside. So it's very clear this is where we are starting. Even if you have several paragraphs of content, you finish it with the triple quote. So the content is very clear. So make sure the content is clear, but at the same time, double down is found to be doing better. This again, I mentioned a little, but to be more formal, give the model an out. Meaning, when you are asking a model to produce something, always give it a way so that it can say no, it can say I don't know, it can ask clarification and so on. Without, if you just ask a question, it's going to always give an answer, right? So the answer could be right, answer could be wrong. Why it could be wrong is because it, like various challenges it has, and I hope you already know some of them, things like it hallucinate, it has bias, and various other issues, right? So therefore it can go wrong. So to avoid it, something that we can do is give some way of talking about is make sure you give some way out to the model so that it can not always or tell something that is not appropriate, not correct, and so on, right? So here is one, right? So there's a way of a possible out is instead of just asking what are the best strategies for social media marketing, so we can ask what are the strategies. At the same time, the effectiveness depends on certain factors. Please mention them. Right? So either we can ask it to be more like be specific, tell what where it suits, or it can even, we can also ask things like, okay, ask me a question, and that's another way. Or you can also say things like, okay, if you don't know, say don't know. Is another way. So there are different ways to do it, but make sure you do it so that you get the final answers or the final results right. One more strategy is to provide reference text. I was talking about reference text, but I didn't specifically say how to provide and when to provide. So we can give, like, so the problem, one of the other problems usually we have is this bias and misinformation and all that happens because the answers are going to come from the vast data that it has already collected and built upon. And instead of doing that, if we want specific right answers, we can ask or we can instruct it to answer using a reference text. So we can say, okay, answer only based on this, right? We can say things like this. Use the provided articles. We are specifically saying delimited by triple quotes to answer questions. If the answer cannot be found in the articles, write or say, I could not find an answer. Right? So we are giving a proper reference. At the same time, we are also giving, we are giving a reference. At the same time, we are also giving a way out. And also we are saying, okay, if the answer is not there in the text, don't just cook up an answer from what it knows, what you know from other places. If you don't know, say you don't know. Right, so and then you can put a text and you can obviously start writing the questions one after the other or just one and so on. So when you're answering, when it is answering, you also can ask it to cite. So it can refer to places and say, okay, this page, if you are giving a document, it can say, okay, this page, this sentence, this place, and citing within the reference. So those are all possible if you specifically say so. And also you can give a way out like we did earlier. So in fact, if you are using a generic chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Perplexity, one of these common generic AI chatbot, then all these are needed. But there are specific one builds for specific tasks. Those takes care of these sort of things automatically. For example, there is a specific chatbot only where you can upload text and ask questions, and it can only answer those texts. So you don't have to specifically say for that particular one. Like this particular one, you don't have to say, give me answers only from this text. Because that bot is built by considering this. Generic ones are not going to be built like that. Specific ones are built. For example, now something that is getting very popular is Google's Notebook LM. Okay, so there's one called Notebook LM. What it does is exactly similar to what we're talking about here. So what it does is we can upload documents. And then when we ask questions, we don't have to specifically say, answer me from the text I uploaded. You just can ask questions. And it only answers from the text you upload. Right? So this is a specific tool built only for that. But generic tools is what we are discussing here. Things like ChatGPT, the most popular one, or other similar tools. They are all, we have to be specific because it by default, by nature, by the usual system, it checks from everywhere and it has a lot of information. It's not limited. So therefore, if you don't specifically say this, and even if you give some text and ask answers, if you don't specifically say give answer only from this text, and if you don't know, say don't know. If you don't have enough information, say insufficient information. If you don't say those, it can try to help you, or it can give you answer thinking that it can helping you by taking from somewhere else, which is out of the context, out of the text we wanted, and so on. So we have to be careful about that. It is also possible to give some time for these models to think, right? So we can let it think a bit before giving answers. As you might realize, these things are giving answers without even thinking, right? They are too fast to answer without thinking. So we can make it to think, right? So that's possible. So how we can do it is things like this. One, we can instruct the model to work out its own solution before rushing into a conclusion. So one is, for example, let's take an example, like I'm going to ask it to controversial topic, mark a submission, an assignment. I want to mark. I want AI to mark it, like this tool to mark it, right? So one, I can just give an answer and ask it to, okay, see, is it right or wrong, right? Most probably it will mark it properly, but we don't know for sure. One, what we can do is we can ask the same question from it first, and then ask, prepare your answer first. Here is an answer. Compare the two answers. So it thinks a bit. It doesn't just look at the answer and say, okay, yes or no, right? So it's going to think a bit. It's going to first come up with its own answer, and then answer, and then compare, right? So like, for example, here, right? So we can give a problem statement and we can say, so instead of saying something like determine if my solution is correct or not, that is one way of doing it, where we can just give a solution You can give a problem and say, this is my solution. We can say like this. First, work out your own solution to the problem, then compare your solution to the students or my solution, and then you give the detail, right? So you can, then it takes time to think, come up with its own answer, the answer we gave, compare the two, and so on. So some of these problems that we encounter, like it gives misinformation, it gives biased information, it gives wrong information or wrong answers, those can be fixed actually by writing the right prompts. There are a lot of work and projects like this are done by writing prompts and building systems on top of it. In fact, like there are people here who are doing something similar as well, right? So work like that, where we are helping others to write tools. The tools are, what it's going to do is tool will talk to one of these large language model, but in between it will have more context. It will put things like this. It will say like, hey, don't just give an answer. Make sure the answer is right. Think a bit, process it, go step by step, also the different things. So those will help make the system perform better. So those are few strategies. You also can improvise, right? So what I'm discussing are not every possible options, but some ideas. And by understanding what is going on, you should be able to improvise and figure out more. So next we'll go into some best practices. How do we do it, right? So some of these things I already said, but I didn't specifically say how to do it, right? So be clear and specific is one best practice. I already have shown examples in a different way, like this: give instructions, give context, and so on, right? So how do we do it is giving detailed instruction and be more specific, right? So that is what I'm saying here, how to be doing that, just for fun.
There's a lot of gray area in Make Me a Prince. I could just
Sorry about that.
make you a prince. Oh, no. Right. You'd be snuggled up with that dude for the rest of your life. Be specific with your words. The deal is in the detail. Got it.
I hope you have watched the movie. So be more specific, right? And give details, right? So give the right details, specific details. The next best practice is to provide context. I already mentioned it, but as a best practice, I am listing it. I have shown examples also. Let's just move on. This is something that I didn't specifically discuss earlier. Use simple and direct language, right? Don't make things complicated. Even our communication, it is true, right? It's not just about communicating with these systems. Avoid overly complex sentences. Keep the sentences simple. Keep it short, right? So do it like how you would do it with a baby or a child, right? So keep it simple, keep it clear, so that it understands things better. And also, whenever possible or as long as possible, avoid jargons. So keep them simple. This I already mentioned. I already have shown also one, give desired format, right? So specifically say what you want. And also we can specifically say the steps that you had to follow. One other thing is don't give up, right? So when usually first time or second time, you will not get what you want. So keep trying, right? So keep improving. Over time, you also get better. And like you get the best answer as well, right? So you'll get better in the communication. So keep on repeating. So one option is things like start with the basic prompt, just like a thing that is not appropriate, like not complete, but look at the answer, see how you can make it better, which part it's going wrong. So you can keep conversation, right? Keep it conversational. and improve. In fact, like when I started a long time back, or not very long time, or 2 years back, this is what I was doing. So I was just asking simple questions, but I know like, okay, this is not what's going on. It's not answering properly. So you keep improving your prompts based on that, right? So you keep on improving. So that's some best practices. Actually, they are coming from the strategies, but just to make sure they are put as practices and how you can do it. Let me go into some more advanced prompting techniques where there are systems which people have proposed. We will discuss those and easy to remember and various other things. So prompting patterns. One is known as this, like if you have an account in any one of these systems, and if you start using it for a while, it figures out your style and it started conversing and also responding in your style, right? So since then, whatever you ask, it's going to respond to you in a way you usually expect, and you would have, it got trained, get trained, right? So get trained. So things like these systems will what we call as memory, meaning it remembers what happened in the past, right? So and based on that, it can do future. So it can also remember things, and also you can customize it. You can say it what exactly it want and so on. So, however, when you want these systems to do somebody else's work, not your work, so you use this system to do your work, you might use this system to do somebody else's work, your assistant's work, your teacher's work, somebody else's work, your friend's work, somebody else's work, then you have to specifically say, it is not what I want. This is not the usual thing. I want something else. I want you to be somebody else. I want you to respond like, not the usual way, differently. So that you have to specifically say. So the best practice, and also something that you have to normally do, is start with a persona or give a persona to this system. So tell the system, but specifically it is expected to behave, or but we expect it from it, right? So whether you expect it to be like me, or you expect it to be like a student of certain age, or various other things, or an expert of certain things, right? Like for example, even let's say the lesson plan example. If you are like a new lecturer and you want to prepare a lesson plan, and maybe you have less idea about how to do it, but then there are people who have done it, and there are enough information on the web on lesson plans, how people have done and put, right? So we ask the system to be one of them? Not obviously me, because I'm not the expert, but then there are experts data that the system is trained on. Can we ask the system to be one of those experts, right? One of those experts in a specific field. So those are possible by following this persona or the style, right? So we basically say what's the role we expect the system to take. And also the role doesn't come alone, right? So the role, for example, if you are taking a specific role, if you are like, let's say, a language teacher, and then you have to say, well, yeah, which language, which country, right? Same language, different countries, different, right? So, or literature or history, they are different from different things. So we had to bring in more context, more detail. You had to give about what we expect from the system, or whom we are expecting from the system, actually, right? So how the systems to behave with us, whom we are expecting it to behave like, right? So that we had to be clear. So that is the idea of the persona's pattern. The idea is to specifically say, not just say, okay, you are supposed to behave like an expert in, let's say, history, but give more context. You are a history person, this is the place, this is where the time, now answer, right? So give more details. So you can include things like specialized insight, opinions, all that you can give. And also you can narrow it down. You can say, this is what we are expecting. Let's say, for example, history, we can say, okay, you are a history expert in the certain era or certain timeline. And you can say, within that timeline only, I want you to answer. So we can specifically say those as well, not just a role, but also more context around the role. So here is an example, pattern for the prompt, persona prompt. We can say things like, from now on, you are act as, let's say, a teacher or like a historian, expert. Pay close attention to details, or like we can give the details here. Sorry, I couldn't miss the color there. Provide output that's that the particular persona would usually give, right? So regarding an input. So here's an example. From now on, act as a professor of educational psychology. Pay close attention to how cognitive development impact learning strategies. Provide output that the professor would regarding the input, right? So we specifically give not just a role, but also a few more context. So here it's not just about the role. We are also saying, we are not just saying, okay, professor of educational psychology. We are going more, right? So we are giving more details. So that will help. Now, another one is, actually, this is also very useful in teaching, like personalized education and so on, is this flipped interaction. The idea of flipped interaction, maybe I'll just go to an example, will help, is let the tool to ask questions or let the tool to lead the conversation, right? So this is useful even like role playing and learning like role playing and so on, right? So we can ask the tool to be somebody and also to lead the discussion, right? So here we are asking it to like, from now on, I would like you to ask me questions to do a specific task. When you have enough information, the task, then you can do the task and produce the output. You can say specifically what the output is, what the task is, and so on. So that's another one. Like we can ask, let it take the lead and clarify everything that it needs to clarify before it goes and does what we ask it to do. And so that's like flipping. So the flipping is to let it to lead. Leading can be leading questions, leading can be leading a conversation. So here we are just talking about question, the example, but it can be anything. Right? So let it to lead is possible. It's very similar to how we converse with others. So it's possible to do it. So we don't have to be always active and let the tool to be passive and let it only answer, but we can also make it active and we become play the other role. So again, just an example. I would like you, from now on, I would like you to ask me questions to better understand my challenges with time management in college. When you have enough information to provide guidance, create a personalized study plan for me. Okay. So here, as you can see, the prompt itself doesn't have enough information, right? So this is the starting point, and we expect the tool or the system to come back and ask more questions until it gets enough information before it starts working on it and produce an output. So the next one is to refine this refining questions. So here's an example. From now, I ask, when I ask a question, suggest a better version of the question, right? So we are asking the tool, letting the tool to be to refine the question, right? So when we ask question, if you feel like the questions we are not one, we may be lazy. So there are also discussions about like this, right? So it looks like writing these prompts themselves seems to be more harder than doing the work, right? So if two sides, one, if we are redoing, so obviously this is useful if we keep on repeating the same work, right? So come up with proper prompt with all this considered, and then we can reuse it in several different situations. So that way it's useful. One. The other one is you can do things like this, meaning we can even ask the system to help to come up with the right prompt, right? In fact, there are specialized chatbots only for making prompts, right? So there are ones that we can converse, and what it will do is it will make a proper prompt. It will like, you can ask a question, it will say, okay, this is missing, that is missing. At the end, you get a proper prompt, and you can use the prompt in some other place to get some out. Those are also possible. Right, so here is an example for it, refinement. So suggest a better version of the question to use that incorporates information specific to a specific use case or an exam. So we can ask it to improve it. That's the whole idea. There is another pattern called verify or cognitive verifier pattern. So you can give the response it gave previously, and you can say, okay, this is the answer you gave. Now we can ask it to challenge its answer and improve it, right? So we have, it is an answer. We say, okay, you gave this answer, challenge it yourself. This is the right answer, right? So like challenge this response by highlighting any possible errors, biases, and alternative response. So you can see we are going one level up and letting it to do that work also, the work we are supposed to do. We are supposed to come up with the right prompt, but we can also say do like this. Maybe we have a bad prompt and it give answers, so we were not very careful in covering all the angles. So we can just come up with, again, prompts and make it to do those work. There is the next one, reflection. So we can ask it to reflect on this, reflect on its answer actually. So in fact, there is a complete area of research which is talking about letting this AI to explain what it is doing, right? So usually when we ask a question, it gives an answer. It's not telling you what it is doing, how it is coming out with this answer, where it is finding all this, how it is putting these things together. It is not telling all that. But there is an area where we are building AI systems. In fact, here, Damayanti, who is here, is also somebody who is working on or interested working on explainable AI. So explainable AI, the idea is the AI, can it explain what it is doing, right? So why it is doing certain things and so on. In a very layman sense, I'll not go into details, right? One reason I also don't know the details. Right? So what we can basically do is let it reflect, right? So like, as you can see, we are saying things like explain the reasoning and assumptions behind your response. If possible, use specific examples or evidence to support your answer. Moreover, please answer any potential ambiguities or limitations in your answer. So we can be more specific and give this hint so that it, or these instructions, so it can give better response. So what we discussed up to now are different patterns, we call them. Using these patterns, it's possible to communicate in different ways. Here are a few. In fact, like I just took it from somewhere on the web. Different methods we call of ways. Usually what we'll be normally doing is this thing called the zero shot. The very first example I was showing you is one like that. The idea of zero shot is how many times and what sort of information you communicate with this model or with this system, right? So zero shot means no examples provided to the LLM. LLM is large language model. Don't have to worry too much about it. It's the system to respond to your request. LLM is expected to know the answer. That is zero shot. We just ask. We don't give example. We don't give context. We don't give enough. One shot, we give one example. Right? So we give examples to say, okay, this is what we expect. Right? So we have seen like examples for that in our discussion. And there are other ways like few shots, more than one examples. There are ways like chain of thoughts. So this is to provide reason. So like we discussed a little ago, we do it through reasoning and logic. We keep asking few more questions, multiple shots, and so on. So there is also this chain of thoughts with there is other techniques as self-confidence and also and so on. I'll not go into all the details, but whatever can just do this prompt in one go with all together, or you can even have a prompt which is like without examples, but then you should know what you will expect. You expect different answers to different situations. So if you want to do like a lot of trials and a lot of times, you can go simple like 0 shot or 1 shot, and you keep that prompt, and then you can like go with multiple of these, right? So these are not all of them are like standalone. We can combine, right? So I'll show some examples as we go. This is just to show you that there are these different methods in terms of we'll start with 0 shot versus few shots. Like we said, it's just one. Say, for example, here is one, explain the concept of a feedback loop in control systems, right? So don't worry what it is. It's just we are asking to explain something without saying anything else, right? So that's 0. Few shots. So we can give with few shots some example. 1 shot is one example. I just skipped 1 shot. I'm just showing few. For 1 is just 1. So let me show a few shot example for the same, right? So few shot example, the question is still the same. Explain the concept of a feedback loop in a control system, simple terms, right? But I'm doing it with few shots. So how do I do it is explain engineering concepts in simple terms, by the way. So feedback loops in control system is an engineering example, engineering simple like concept. But I'm giving other examples to show what I expect. So for example, I'm taking an example like gears. Maybe hopefully it's easier. Gears are wheels with teeth that work together to transmit motion or force. When one gear turns, it makes the other gears to turn on the opposite direction and so on. So I give some description. So that's an example. This is few shots, and therefore I'm giving multiple examples, right? So I'm giving multiple examples, and then asking, okay, now the prompt is the same prompt like 0 shot, right? So 0 shot prompt is at the end. Now the 0 shot prompt. But before that, I have given, I had told the context, and then I have given an example. No. So this whole thing is a prompt. This is the prompt. Also, yeah. Right one. Yeah. Yeah. Direction. Sure, that is multiple. Yeah. So you go chain like one after the other, right? So here we are some method. So if so this is too much work for us. So what we can do is we can just ask about something that is more easier, so that you can easily answer, and then you can go into more difficult ones. So and also make sure that the easier ones are correct, right? So before we go into the difficult one and so on, right? So I mean, the same thing can also be achieved by specifying certain other things, like for instance, instruction. We can say, okay, feedback loop, this is what we want. We want to know like a definition. We want to know an example. We can take it in other angles. So the idea of few shots is by giving some example. That's all. It's just an example. So chain of thought, I mentioned about it earlier. So when you have like a complex task to do, like multiple things, so the things like research, analysis, if you want to do problem solving and so on. So if you do that together without clear separations, if you don't do them properly, step by step, if you don't write them down clearly, there's a high chance that it all get confused. So therefore, the idea of chain of thought is useful to make it accurate coherent, and also chain of thought also will help you do this in separate parts. Yes, an example. So we have an existing prompt or question. We just will put the usual prompt, explain your reasoning by step before arriving at the final answer. Right. So it's going to, I'll just take an example. Like, yeah, it's one I had. Yeah. So here is an example. Right. So so this is a few combinations. There's an like a few short. We are just an example given, but at the same time, it's also chain of thoughts because we are had told you to think about. The prompt part of the asking you to make a thought. This is after saying okay. So here we are saying consider like in fact, like what I have copied here is only the answers, but let me just go back a step. So I have also included explain your reasoning step by step, right? So that is mentioned in the second prompt, not in the first, I mean, second interaction, not in the first interaction. So first interaction, we are just asking some very lot of questions. It gives an answer without any given answer. So it can go wrong when you ask twisted, sometimes even easier questions, sometimes twisted question, but because it's not good. I mean, it doesn't do math as such, right? It's a language model. So specifically to do it. So, but then second one, what I have done is we have done like chain of thought. We have said, okay, don't just answer, but reason. Then see what it is doing. Like even the first answer, it says answer is 11. There it says started with 5 balls. The question is about tennis balls, how many are there? 5 tennis balls are there, and then 2 cans of tennis balls are there. Can have 3 balls, and how is the total? So it goes into steps. It says, okay, there are 5, 3 cans, 2, so it's 6, and then both together is 11. The answer is 11. So the same answer. The second one, when you do the same thing, when you do like ask you to think about it, it gives a right answer because it goes into steps. Easier steps, it's easy for it to like an addition, it will not do wrong. But problem solving, it's going to do wrong. So make sure it goes step by step so that it can think each step separately and give the right answer ultimately. So you can give it has given the right answer by considering chain of thought, meaning like we had told it to think. Right? Go step by step, basically. That is what I mean by thinking. Right? So if the prompts are more complex, in fact, even these things won't work. So that is one place where we had to think about this thing called prompt chaining. I will not go all the details. I'll give some time for you also to like ask questions and discuss. So, but the idea of prompt chaining is to break down, as it says here, one big problem or prompt into a series of simpler prompts. So you have a bigger problem or bigger thing to do. So you can break it down into smaller parts. I'll just take an example and then I'll move on. So here's an example. Prompt without chaining. So prompt chaining is what we are discussing. So let's say we have some to review a contract. So that the prompt is review this contract for risk, focusing on data privacy and liability caps. Right. So that's there's a contract and we are asking you to review, and the contract is given. Right. So by the way, another way of giving text or our context is by writing. So we can say that this contract and finishing. So that is the starting part, and this is finishing. So starting is just like I say the back here. This is the next step. And finishing is like this. So this is similar to what I earlier discussed about this triple code. So we can put things in triple code. We can also put this in something like this. And so this is without chaining. So we have said review the contract. And then we are also saying then draft an email to the vendor with your concerns and proposed changes. So this is without chaining, but we are asking you to do a lot of things. We are asking you to do review it based on certain aspects. And then we are asking you to produce prepare an email, both at the same step. So this is not like a very big one, but it has at least 2 items, right? So, but obviously when you think of a larger task, let's say, for example, if you want to review a few papers and like a literature review, right? So there are multiple steps involved. So things like this is a longer one, right? So multiple steps. You don't ask it to do it in a single go, but what you can do is we can do things, this one called chaining. The idea of chaining is you break it into multiple prompts. So breaking into multiple prompts has a lot of advantages. One, individual prompts are simple, so it gives the right answer. The other one is if one of these things go wrong, we can only fix that. Right. So if we write everything together in a big one, if something goes wrong, one, we don't know where it has gone wrong. The other one is we have to fix everything again. Right. So we breaking into smaller parts, obviously it's some problem solving idea, right? So the idea is you break the problem into smaller ones, so you can work on individual problems. I let you to work on individual problems. And then if one of these things, one of the response is wrong, we can refine only that and leave the others out. Right? So that's the idea of chaining. I think it's sort of obvious. So you don't have to always give a detailed one prompt or even like for a problem, if the problem is you can break them into tasks, break them and give them separately. That's the idea. I will finish with just some framework that I use. It's called the Reason framework, just to remember. And we discuss a lot of different things, and we can't always use everything. We should come with practice and start using one by one. But some of these frameworks, they consider all these angles, all these aspects. So Reason is one, RISEN stands for 5 different things. R for role, I for instruction, S for steps, E for expectation or end goal, N for narrowing narrowing, right? So things that we discussed are on top of it, but a usual prompt, detailed prompt will have these 5 things. So whenever I'm writing prompts, I'm always remembering this and keeping this in mind, making sure these things are mentioned or covered in my prompt, right? So in fact, I have more details about each one of these items, but I'll not go into all those details. But the idea is, first thing, we in fact have discussed these things, and therefore I'll not go into detail. That's the whole idea. Role, we are telling the system what to expect. When I say role, it's not just only about to say what it is, and also we say more about the perspective. The example we took about the professor, we don't just say, okay, you are a professor and so on. So you also give more detail. Instructions is telling it what to do, right? What we are expecting it to do. We are giving a context, role, telling it what to do, telling the steps. Take these steps, tell the steps, and expectation of the end goal. Finally, what we are expecting. Narrowing is to limit. Okay, say this many sentences, this many paragraphs, consider only these years, various other things. Narrow the scope, right? Do only this part, not anything else. So we can interpret this sentence like this, each item differently, but ultimately the idea is make sure to have these things covered in a prompt that you write, like if you are writing a detailed prompt. So in fact, I have details. I'll share the slides. Maybe I will just skip all that. So I'll just finish with a few more things. In fact, like these things we already have discussed in other places as well. Make sure, all these are good and well, but then the point is we have to make sure when the communication happens, we understand the limitations of these tools and therefore use that understanding to improve our communication and also improve the output these tools produce, right? So that is what we have to focus on. So therefore, make sure when you are doing this, you look at the prompt, whether we are missing something, identify whether there are biases. Biases meaning like whether we are making sure it is to the context we want. That is where I started the discussion with. And the prompt, what sort of impact it's going to have, right? So the output it's producing, whether it has the right output it produces. And don't be shy to rewrite and redefine or refine, like we discussed earlier. Right? So those, it's not just about prompts, it's about the whole process, right? So make sure the whole process is understood and clear. And this is one of the main reasons for students or learners specifically. We had to educate them with these about these limitations and challenges so that because they have less understanding about the output, right? Because they are learners, they might not know what the output is. So if they don't understand these limitations and work on it, they might learn wrong things or inappropriate as well. And keep testing and iterate or reiterate. Even when you are doing, you implement these and you can try it in different examples. So make sure you look at these different angles, not just focus only on the prompt, but when you are looking at the prompt and the output you are getting, and also things like, yeah, so I also have some ideas about how you can reduce hallucination. I, in fact, mentioned some of these. So hallucination, as you know, it's producing wrong, factually wrong in output. So this is where I was talking about giving a way out for it to say no or don't know, and also making sure it only comes within a particular context or particular text that we give and so on. So these are ways. I mentioned a little about latency earlier. Be precise, concise, and therefore you can produce. You can keep the communication better, faster, efficient, and also obviously our time. Right. So this, I hope, will help. And just to finish, so I mean, there are a lot of tools you have seen by now. I'm just skipping all that. So I mentioned about some of these tools earlier. So in fact, like some of these tools, like when the AI bots can VP and so on. But then there are specific tools that are like, for example, things like SciSpace is only working with research papers and so on, right? So those tools are specifically designed only for research papers. So and also these sort of prompts like saying give the answer only from the research papers are inbuilt in those tools. So understand the difference between these tools. You don't have to use all the tools, but make sure we use the right tool. And that will also help, where you don't have to go through this whole prompting process for every prompt. But we discuss about every prompt is for generic AI bots, where we had to give all the context. We had to say the context, we had to say the role, we had to say take from here, take from there, all sort of different things we had to consider. But there are people coming up with new tools like what I mentioned here. They answer questions on certain aspects. Even this tool, this code generation tool from GitHub, is only answering things from things that are in GitHub. GitHub is a repository where you keep code and so on. Right. Yeah, so the Microsoft 365 has AI incorporated into all the documents that, so Microsoft 365 has documents, right? So PowerPoints, documents, other documents. So those documents are also, if we enable it, the answers are going to come from the documents you have. Let's say you have a folder with files. The Copilot can take things from those files, your files. Right? So you have a system, your Microsoft account, the Copilot can take from there. And if you have Outlook, it can even, let's say an email. You want to respond to an email based on some document that are there in your folder. So it all are connected. So it's possible to integrate all this and use. So things like Microsoft 365 is productivity tools. So the productivity for improving productivity, things like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, things like that. So the things that are there in those are accessible to this AI bot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Grammarly is also an AI tool. Grammarly is the Grammarly by default is not a generative AI tool. So what it does is it uses AI to correct English and correct things. But then Grammarly now has what is known as Grammarly Go, which is a generative AI tool. So what it can do is it can suggest you have a paragraph, it can rewrite it in a different way, summarize it, make it shorter, make it longer, add certain things and make it bullet point wise. All that it can do within Grammarly. So that is a generative AI tool. But Grammarly by itself is just not a generative. It's not generating new thing. The Grammarly is just correcting English. That's also an AI tool. Okay, so that's all I have, and happy to answer some questions.
So, yes,